Stevenson, one of the women arrested at Sarah's vigil. Also tonight, I'm speaking to Dame Esther Rantzen, who is leading calls for a new discussion on assisted dying. Dame Esther wants to see a debate in Westminster after MPs told ministers they must involve themselves in a conversation that's already taking place in other parts of the UK. Harsh criticism for the Home Office from the sacked Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration in one of 13 reports released simultaneously today. And I will miss him every day. Tributes to hairy biker Dave Myers, who has died at the age of 66. All that to come, and much more on the UK Tonight. Three separate police forces could and should have stopped Sarah Everard's killer from ever becoming a police officer. The inquiry into Wayne Couzens' crimes has found police repeatedly failed to spot the warning signs about his behaviour, with a catalogue of failings in how he was recruited and how he was vetted. And the inquiry chair delivered a stark warning today, saying that without a radical overhaul of policing practices and culture, there is nothing to stop another Couzens operating in plain sight. Well, in the past few minutes, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has responded to this inquiry. The Prime Minister saying no woman should ever feel unsafe on our streets and the police must urgently make changes to earn back the public's trust. Sky's Ivor Bennett has our first report tonight.
This was the moment Wayne Couzens was finally apprehended, a week after Sarah Everard went missing.
Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
OK.
But we now know this serial sex offender could and should have been stopped much earlier, years before, and should never have been a police officer to begin with. Sarah Everard was snatched from the streets of South London in March 2021 after Couzens staged a fake arrest. The 33-year-old was then raped and murdered. But this was Couzens only 4 days before, indecently exposing himself to female staff at a McDonald's drive-through in Kent. He was in his car and used his credit card, but still wasn't caught by police. One of several missed opportunities spanning 2 decades and 3 separate forces.
The totality of the evidence is still something which is profoundly shocking and horrifying.
So in your view, could Sarah Everard's murder have been prevented?
I think it is possible that it could have been prevented. The fact that he was a police officer, it could have been something that was removed from a much earlier stage.
At the start of his career, Couzens was twice denied a position with Kent Police, first at interview, then during vetting, but was still allowed to be a volunteer constable. In 2011, he joined the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, despite the vetting force recommending he shouldn't pass because of his financial situation. In 2015, his car was linked to an allegation of indecent exposure in Kent, but police took no further action.
We could and we should have done more. It's a matter of professional, personal regret that we didn't. And I apologise to the victim at the time.
Despite still being linked to that allegation, he was allowed to join the Metropolitan Police in 2018. Another indecent exposure followed in 2020 that was again not properly investigated, this time by Kent Police. And in the month before Sarah Everard was killed, 2 separate reports of indecent exposure at the same fast food outlet in Kent. These were all major red flags missed by police, but they weren't the only warning signs. The report found Couzens had a preference for violent, extreme pornography, a history of debt and excessive spending, and it even says there's evidence he allegedly committed a very serious sexual assault against a child before his career began.
It's ghastly, but it lays bare a very low base that we're starting from. And so whilst those improvements have started, we have a long way to go to build the high degree of resilience and strength to reduce to an absolute minimum the threat of anybody so horrific being within policing.
The inquiry chair has made 16 recommendations in what is her first report of 3. They include a radical overhaul of police vetting and recruitment and changes to how police respond to indecent exposure. In a statement, Sarah Everard's family said, "We strongly support the recommendations that Lady Ailish has made and trust that these will be implemented forthwith. We believe that Sarah died because Couzens was a police officer. She would never have got into a stranger's car." And that is the bottom line. He was given a position of trust that he so appallingly abused, and there were numerous chances for police to prevent it. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
Well, coming up a little later in the programme, I'm going to speak to Patsy Stevenson. She was one of the women controversially arrested during a vigil following Sarah Everard's murder. She'll be joining me in the studio at around 8:30 tonight. Well, the Couzens inquiry sure to feature on the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Our extended press preview and news review is happening from 10:30 tonight with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us this evening, the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone and the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorpe. Next tonight, the government is coming under pressure to involve itself in discussions on the laws around assisted dying. It's a conversation that's already happening in other parts of the UK. An assisted dying bill is expected to be introduced in the Scottish Parliament later on this year. In just a moment, we'll hear from Dame Esther Rantzen, who's leading calls for this issue to be debated in Westminster. But first, our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports from the Isle of Man, where MPs have already voted to allow assisted dying for those who are terminally ill.
What can you do? Can you do me sits?
Sue's dogs are her distraction. A distraction from the pain and the loss after months of sitting at her dying husband's bedside. In July 2021, Simon was diagnosed with the most aggressive form of motor neurone disease. He developed serious stomach complications and a chronic bed sore.
I eventually said to the nurse, why is this so bad? Why can't you get rid of it? And she said, I'm sad to say that Simon is decomposing while he's still alive.
As Simon grew weaker, he took what little action he could to speed up the inevitable. He stopped eating.
He'd chosen to starve himself to death if it carried on any longer. But at the point where he got that bad, it was too late to starve himself to death.
Do you want to see a change in the law?
Desperately. I don't want to see anybody suffer like Simon did.
So this is the House of Keys, our Parliament on the Isle of Man.
In parliaments across the British Isles, formal and informal talks are taking place to see if and how assisted dying can be legalised. Nowhere is closer to making it a reality than here on the Isle of Man.
As people become more au fait with how assisted dying works, as they actually see it in practice and get the right training and support, more and more people see the benefits of it.
The proposed bill would make assisted dying available to patients who meet a strict criteria. They must be adults who have the capacity to make decisions for themselves. Residents must have spent more than a year living on the Isle of Man. They must be suffering from a terminal illness where there is no likelihood of improvement, and expected to die within 6 months. The proposals would see assisted dying provided through the island's health system, with doctors potentially offered an opt-in clause.
It's the people with vulnerability that I'm most concerned about, that maybe coerced, maybe feel a perception of being worthless and not want to be here, maybe feel that not being a burden to their family is the right answer. And it's these vulnerable people in society that I feel may be sucked into assisted dying.
Whatever happens here on the Isle of Man has no direct bearing on the rest of the British Isles. But it does show that some very difficult conversations are taking place. And if the assisted dying law is passed here, well, that could propel change elsewhere. All sides accept that this difficult debate must happen. It's about who has control over your life and death.
Sit.
Ashish Joshi, Sky News on the Isle of Man.
Dame Esther Rantzen, who has stage 4 cancer, has been calling for MPs to have a vote on assisted dying. She's campaigning for people who have physical illnesses and a life expectancy of 6 months or less to have the right to choose when they die. In December last year, Dame Esther Rantzen revealed that she had joined the assisted dying clinic Dignitas. I spoke to her a little earlier today and started by asking for her reaction to the report today.
It was a bit disappointing. I had hoped that the report's conclusion would include asking the Parliament in Westminster here in Britain to have another debate on this subject, because they haven't debated it since 2015. And since then, a lot of other countries around the world have legalized assisted dying in various different ways, so that there's plenty of evidence to pick from. And they haven't called for us to have a debate. So I'm afraid it's up to people power. It's up to all the British voters to get in touch with their own MPs and say, put this in your manifesto if we haven't had time to debate it before the election, because this is a life and death issue that matters a great deal to all of us.
Why do you think there has been a reluctance to put this further up the political agenda? This is something that has been personal to you since you lost your husband. I know that you made a programme about death and how to die with dignity, essentially, and how people want to spend their final months, weeks and days. And it's become very personal to you now. You announcing before Christmas that you joined Dignitas. Why do you think there is this reluctance politically to tackle this topic head on again?
I don't know. I don't know what it is, whether because it's such an emotional issue and because there are very strong feelings on both sides of the debate, they didn't feel they wanted to come down hard on one side or the other. But we're not asking them to do that. We're saying we want a debate. That's all we're asking for a debate and a free vote. And unfortunately, they haven't recommended that. But they have put together quite a lot of evidence. For example, the countries that have legalized assisted dying around the world have found that although people were worried it might damage palliative care, it hasn't. It hasn't damaged palliative care at all, and for some countries, it's actually improved it. So that's very important, because some of the opponents have claimed the opposite. So it's worthwhile having this valuable evidence. There isn't a slippery slope. When a country has decided to legalize a certain kind of assisted dying, that's the way it has remained.
What have people been saying to you? Because I'm sure since you came out and said that you joined Dignitas, you were starting to have these kind of conversations. Do you get the sense that there is a public appetite, a real societal shift that says we need to have this debate, not necessarily a change in the law, but we need to talk about it more and explore it?
Yes, absolutely. And the law at the moment is a mess. And indeed, this report says so. Lord Falconer describes the law at the moment a mess. Because, say, I decide to go to Dignitas because my life is not bearable at the moment and I need to be able to choose to bring it to an end, I can't take my family with me. I can't take my loved ones. I can't take my close friends, because they run the risk of being investigated by the police for having conspired to bring about my manslaughter or murder. And some of the cases in this report demonstrate how painful that is for loving families who are doing the best to support someone close to them and are then accused by the police and investigated by the police. It's a mess at the moment. It needs changing. It's up to Parliament to decide the changes they want to bring in, but they must do it quickly for all our sake.
Since you went public with your diagnosis over a year ago with stage 4 lung cancer, there was a big reaction. People care about you. You've been in public life, whether on our TV screens or as a campaigner, making a difference for decades. People are invested in you. How is your health? Because I know when you last spoke publicly, you talked about the fact that you were going to have another scan. You were on a drug that you described as a miracle drug. How are you doing?
Nothing has changed. I'm still on the miracle drug. I'm still anticipating another scan in a couple of weeks, and that scan will reveal how I am. So at the moment, I'm in touch with my family and my friends. I don't go out. I don't. I stay at home and enjoy the company of those closest to me and a cat that has adopted us. Adorable cat. I was never a cat lover, but now
they tend to know. They tend to know when you need them, cats.
Yeah. Well, I didn't realise that. And this cat definitely thinks he's a dog, because he seeks out my company and sits with me in the evening. And it's that's the way my life is at the moment, and I do an awful lot of talking about death, and I'd much rather be talking about life.
Dame Esther Rantzen speaking to me earlier today. Well, she has spoken openly, as I said there in that interview, about her decision to join Dignitas. But there are other clinics in Switzerland which operate very differently, and critics say they need to be much more heavily regulated. Last summer, Alistair Hamilton told his family that he was going to Paris to visit a friend. Instead, he flew to Switzerland to end his life in a clinic in Basel. And ever since, his family have had to fight to get any information from the place where he spent his final days. I spoke to Alistair's mother, Judith, and his brother, Toby, and I started by asking Judith about the last time that she saw Alistair.
I was so happy to think he picking up his spirits and, you know, going to enjoy life again. And I had big hugs and kisses and love you, Mum, you know. And off he went. And, you know, that was the last time I saw him. And seemingly, he wasn't going to Paris at all.
Toby, pick up there, because Alistair didn't reply to his mum's text, and that's when you knew something was really wrong. You called the police. What then happened?
So the missing persons police rang round all of the brothers, getting as much information as they could. I mentioned to them that I was worried that he hadn't flown to Paris and that he had been talking about suicide very frankly and very honestly, very openly. If they could check with immigration that he had definitely gone to Paris. And also we provided his bank statements, his bank records to again check to see if there was any transactions at all to these sort of clinics. And 24 hours later, to our horror, the police came back and confirmed that he had in fact flown to Basel and that there was a large transaction of several £1,000s to Pegasus.
Which is the clinic
where
your brother ended his life.
Yes, that's correct. And from an initial email asking them for information, you can imagine the horror and the panic and the shock of it all, that he'd actually gone through with it, despite us all doing our best to give him reason and strength to continue.
The clinic that Alistair went to, what do we know about them and their processes, Toby? Because this is assisted suicide, this is an assisted dying, and that's something Dignitas, you know, differentiates itself in that respect. It has very strict guidelines, but this clinic, you can go there to take your own life without any kind of physical or medical diagnosis.
So we then started digging around. You look on their website and it's almost their USP, their unique selling point, that you just need to be over 18 years old, of sound mind, not terminally ill. The whole process from start to finish was literally weeks, a few months. Dignitas have a 2-year consultation period, whereas Alistair at Pegasus, his initial application was April, with no terminal illness, no medical diagnosis. August the 14th is when his voluntary assisted dying or voluntary assisted suicide took place. And it's just incredible how different they operate to Dignitas. There's no telephone number advertised on their website. I then finally found a telephone number on the internet, which is just a recorded message directing you to their FAQ page on their website.
Can I just bring in their statement, because I know you want to respond to this. They did provide a statement to Sky News. They've not publicly acknowledged, you know, Alistair in this case before, but they did reply to us here at Sky News, and Pegasus Swiss Association said, "We understand that this is a very distressing time for the family of the deceased, as they had apparently no prior knowledge of his plans. We are very sorry that Pegasus's actions caused the family further distress." This was the not replying to emails. "We will make ourselves available to provide information to the relatives of the deceased, remaining respectful of applicable laws and the privacy and confidentiality which we owe the persons asking for our assistance. At the same time, we are reviewing our internal processes to better address their needs in the future. They go on to say, we understand that voluntary assisted suicide is a sensitive and often controversial topic which touches the families affected by it in a very personal at a very personal level. At the same time, we hope for the sake of people seeking our assistance that the social and individual acceptance of their decision might improve in the future. We believe that adults capable of judgment should be allowed to exercise their right to a self-determined, dignified death.
So I was surprised that they did finally reply, and that is only because Sky were now involved and the media platform that Sky is. Their very first sentence to say, apparently we had no knowledge. Now, I have been crystal clear in numerous emails with them that weren't being answered that we had no knowledge. So I couldn't have made that any clearer. Their apology is somewhat flaky. It just apologises for the distress, not their behaviour in any way whatsoever. And just, it's not good enough, their reply. If they're now saying that they will make information available to us, well,
because
that's
you want
great.
to know about his final days, you want to know what his personal effects are. A watch that you gave to him as a gift, the letter of goodbye, they say, that was written. You haven't had any of that.
And this is 6 months later now with Sky's involvement, but at the time, with my emails, the police, the embassy, they had no desire to communicate with us whatsoever. And like you say, advising my brother just to dispose of all of his possessions and turn up in the clothes that he's wearing and his passport.
Judith, do you support a change in the law in this country on assisted dying, or at least a debate?
I certainly do. I don't honestly believe that our government would allow an organisation like Pegasus to be up and running. I hope if this does become law, it has the same criterion as Dignitas, for accepting the people. There's no way that people should just be able to turn up with £10,000–11,000 available and say, I want to die.
Final question, if I may, and it refers back to the final paragraph I read from the Pegasus statement, and they talk about wanting to change the conversation around assisted suicide to reflect society's differing and moving position on assisted dying. Where do you stand on that, given the devastating impact that this has had on your family, Toby? Do you think that assisted suicide should be talked about as a possibility in the future, in the same breath as assisted dying?
There is a difference, and you do have to be very, very careful with this. And with Alistair's situation, it was just done far too quickly. And yes, people can have a choice, and I'm not against voluntary assisted dying or, dare I say it, suicide. But there has to be so much more regulation in place to be checking the timescales, not weeks, not months, but it must be years, because people can change from mental health, people can recover, people can get back into a better space. And the regulation in Switzerland is nowhere near thorough enough.
Well, a big thank you to Judith and Toby and the Hamilton family for trusting us to tell their story here in the UK tonight. And if you've been affected by any of the issues highlighted, you can contact the Samaritans. Their helpline 116 123, their email joe@samaritans.org. We're just going to break away from UK news for a moment to bring you these pictures from America, the US-Mexico border. Donald Trump visiting Texas today. It's a competing trip with the current president, US President Joe Biden, who's also visiting the US-Mexico border today. Immigration, of course, one of the key issues in this year's presidential election. Both Biden and Trump hoping to win over voters. You can just see pictures of President Biden, the latest pictures we have of him arriving there, being greeted by Border Patrol. There'll be more on these visits coming up in the world with Yalda Hakim at 9 o'clock. Still to come on the UK tonight, the Home Office accused of a culture of defensiveness by the former Chief of Immigration in one of 13 reports released simultaneously today. We'll have the details from Westminster next.
And now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
The biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news. Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Here's what's coming up. Tributes to the hairy biker Dave Myers, who has died at the age of 66. And why young people in Tyne and Wear will now go to the ball after a very generous donation from a local businessman. But first, the former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration has accused the Home Office of a culture of defensiveness. David Neal made this criticism in one of 13 reports he completed while still in post, but they have only been released today. Let's get more on this now. Our political correspondent Matthew Thompson standing by in Westminster. So talk us through it, Matthew.
Well, look, David Neal was sacked just last week after a spectacular falling out with the Home Office. And one of his central critiques had been that the Home Office had dragged its heels on publishing a number of the inspections he'd done into borders and immigration in which he'd been critical of the government. There were 15 such reports outstanding. And as you rightly say, 13 of those were all published in one go at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, which, it won't escape your notice, is the very end of the parliamentary week. As a result of that, the Labour Party, the Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Diana Johnson, have all piled in on the government, accusing them of essentially trying to bury bad news, although a Number 10 spokeswoman did say that the reports were all published as swiftly as possible following the necessary due diligence. Now, in terms of what's actually in them, well, they're wide-ranging. But, for example, one of them looks at asylum claims, and it found that a number of, in the words of David Neal, perverse and unacceptable decisions were being made on asylum claims as a direct result of the pressure put on the department by Rishi Sunak's pledge to tackle the asylum backlog of some 90,000 cases. Another report is critical of the safeguarding procedures around young children in asylum hotels. In several reports, David Neal is excoriating about the Home Office's data collection policies. In one of them, he calls them inexcusably awful. And I could go on. There's lots and lots of this stuff. But I think the point is, it's perhaps hardly surprising that the Home Office wouldn't have wanted a lot of this published, given that it exposes really a litany of failings on what is one of the key platforms, immigration and asylum, on which they want to launch their bid for re-election later this year.
Matthew, thank you, Matthew Thompson, with the latest from Westminster. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, I'm going to speak to Patsy Stevenson. You'll remember she was one of the women arrested at Sarah Everard's vigil. I'm going to talk to her about that damning report into Wayne Couzens' crimes, which revealed a catalogue of police failings. Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. Let's return to our main story now and the catalogue of failings that allowed the killer of Sarah Everard to become a police officer. The inquiry into Wayne Couzens' crimes has found that 3 separate police forces could and should have stopped him. red flags about his behaviour were repeatedly missed or simply ignored. Well, today, the Met Police Commissioner called this report an urgent call to action. But can the police ever win back the trust of the public, and in particular, the trust of women and girls? Well, joining me now in the studio, Patsy Stevenson. You'll remember Patsy. She was arrested by the Met Police at the vigil for Sarah Everard on Clapham Common back in March 2021, a long time ago now, Patsy. But you get the sense that not much has changed. And this report today, the findings in it, there was a sense it was going to be bad, but we didn't quite know it was going to be this bad.
Yeah, and I think I speak for all campaigners right now. We are so exhausted, as are many women, absolutely exhausted, and exhausted of hearing the word urgent and the words shocked and sorry. It's like this 3 years ago, we heard this sort of promise of we're going to vet them correctly, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and it's still not happened. In that time, we've had David Carrick, we've had Cliff Mitchell, we've had so many others. You know, you type in Met Police rapists on Google, there's just so many of them, it's ridiculous and abhorrent.
In light of that, I want to read you out the statement that the Prime Minister has put out this evening. This is the first time we're bringing our viewers this in full. He says this was a chilling, abominable crime that shook the country to its very core. Sarah's murderer was a prolific sex offender carrying a valid warrant card. He was never fit to serve. Police officers should be there to keep us safe, to be our guardians against those who wish to do us harm. That is why Sarah trusted him, and his betrayal of that trust makes his crime even more heinous. I'm sickened by the details that have come to light today, and the police must urgently make changes to earn that trust back. No woman should ever feel unsafe on our streets. It's that word urgent again, isn't it? 3 years on.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to say that, you know, when we have statements from the Prime Minister, the Mayor of London, the Met Police Commissioner, who I've met, by the way, and I don't trust him. But I think when we have these statements, it's always a blanket statement. Someone else has written that for them. I don't think that there is enough care there. I don't think there's enough urgency. I think that a lot of it is just, whilst there's public pressure, we'll say what we need to say, but realistically, where is the change? Because I haven't seen any.
Well, the Met Police have said that things are changing, but these things take time. They talk about their vetting process, which at the time, disturbingly, the inquiry found that actually Wayne Couzens was given the green light to be a police officer because he actually met their vetting guidelines. They say they have changed since then. But this inquiry found that Couzens sexually assaulted a child, tried to kidnap a woman at knife point, and was reported to police 8 times for indecent exposure before he crossed paths, abducted, raped and murdered Sarah Everard. There needs to be a conversation, doesn't there, about serving police officers, because the bad ones are already in there if this was the vetting process back then. And I think what this inquiry highlights is the need to keep vetting and assessing police officers. You shouldn't just get the green light to be one and then be a serving police officer for decades. There should be checks and balances, as there is for doctors, for example, those, you know, there to keep us safe. That should be happening as standard repetitively.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I spoke to some police officers outside New Scotland Yard just before this, because we did a protest. And they were saying, you know, oh, I have police officer friends who wouldn't dare say anything near me because they know they get a telling off. So you know that there's police that would say those things, who view women a certain way, and you still don't say anything, because that's what it's about. It's not just whether they make a comment or whether they do something. It's a mindset. And right now, 100%, there's other Wayne Couzens in the Met right now.
Well, that's exactly what the inquiry said could be operating right now. And it's interesting when you talk about that, about things that are being said and not picked up on. I mean, we talk about low-level crimes. I mean, last week on the show, we were talking about indecent exposure, and that needs to be treated as an offence, not a low-level offence. But the same when people talk about low-level misogyny, it is just misogyny. And it's that attitude that needs to change before anything effective can be done.
Exactly. And that's the problem, is that when we look at vetting, it still doesn't address the actual culture within the Met Police or the policing system.
What people are going
in
into, yeah.
Yeah, because I've spoken to people before about police and they say, well, they're not the Met, though, as if the Met are somehow different. All policing systems are very much, they still have this culture of misogyny, racism, homophobia, and there's not enough space for people to speak up about it when they are in that system, and protection for those people who do speak up. But also, we're not dealing with the actual culture. And like you said, when it's low level, it's just misogyny. If you're objectifying women, that's misogyny. If you have those thoughts in your head already, you're already on that path. These, people that are murdering and raping women aren't some horror movie character hiding down an alleyway. Wayne Couzens had a family. These people are people that you know. You do know these people, and you may think you can trust them, but they can be very manipulative, so you don't know who these people are.
And the red flags were there, what we call the gateway offences, the indecent exposure. And look, I think I know the answer to this, and you don't believe much has changed in police forces, whether it's the Met or anywhere else, in terms of attitudes and things like that. Do you think women and girls feel any safer on the streets, in the company of police? Because the default setting is, if you're in trouble, you go to the police. Do you really think that all of this is changing that for women and girls?
I personally believe that women shouldn't trust the police. And I've said that before. I wish we could. I wish we could. We often hear the rhetoric of, well, who else are you going to go to? Nobody. There isn't anyone right now. And that's a scary thought. There is nobody that women and girls can trust when things go bad.
So if you were in trouble, if somebody was trying to rob you or worse, you wouldn't reach out to the police? You wouldn't?
I get asked this question from family members a lot, actually.
That's what people at home will be thinking.
Of course.
Who else are you going to call?
I want people at home to think, is there a time where you've had a robbery or something's happened, you've called the police, and they've actually found the criminal? They've actually done something about it? Because I know, personally, that I think it was 2 years ago, 5.7% of crimes actually had a resolution to them. And that's appalling. So what are they doing? What are the police here for?
Yeah. Patsy, just a final question. How are you personally 3 years on? Because that image of you being arrested at a vigil for a murdered woman, an abducted, raped, and murdered woman, is so symbolic now of the women and girls' dysfunctional relationship with police. And the big question is, can trust ever be re-established? How do you look back on this image now, so many years on?
I'm going to try not to tear up, because it does still spark those emotions in me. I still have nightmares about what happened to me, but I know that what I do now, my full-time job, my life's work for me, is advocating for women and girls, and I'm never going to stop doing that. And I actually tweeted today, I pray for the day that I don't have to do that. I don't want to have to do this, but there are many people like me who cannot stop, because I have family members who are young family members, and I know they're growing up in this world, and they can't trust police. They can't walk down the road without fear. And that's just not, it feels like we're a second-class citizen at the moment, and yeah.
Well, Patsy, thank you for coming in to talk to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we will speak again. Thank you. Dave Myers, one half of the TV cooking duo, the Hairy Bikers, has died at the age of 66. Back in 2022, he revealed that he had cancer and subsequently underwent chemotherapy. His death was announced by his co-star and friend, Cy King, who said that he will miss him every day. Our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, has been taking a look back at his life.
And there's the ladies who make this all possible. Merry Christmas, girls.
His northern wit was a delight to watch.
If this was oil, that'd be Texas.
Dave Myers, the bespectacled half of the Hairy Bikers duo, was a regular on British television for over 2 decades.
Their friendship extended to the many who tuned in to watch the pair travel, laugh and cook together, bonded through their love of food.
I keep giving always memories of all the things, because we were mates for 10 years before the bikers. Yeah. And those 10 years, all the mad adventures we had, the mad ideas, it keeps flooding back to me. You know, things we haven't changed. With two gadgets sitting on a bench.
Myers was born in Barrow, Furness, Lancashire. The pair met in 1995. Both worked in TV production, Myers as a makeup artist specialising in prosthetics, Cy King as a location manager. After moving to front of camera and finding fame through their cooking show, the pair published numerous books, selling in excess of 6 million copies.
Years of eating gorgeous food have taken a toll.
Even launching their own diet club, admitting they had a wake-up call after a doctor told them they were both middle-aged and morbidly obese. Their relatability, part of the appeal. In 2013, Myers quickly became a fan favourite on Strictly Come Dancing.
I don't care, Dave, what they say, you're my favourite.
What he lacked in skills, he made up for with enthusiasm. More recently, on their cooking show, he'd spoken openly of his cancer diagnosis less than 2 years ago.
When I was told I was ill, I never thought I'd ride a motorcycle again.
There's a spirit of Dave that I've always loved.
Although chemotherapy had left him too unsteady at first to get on his beloved motorbike, he'd managed to return to filming towards the end of last year, travelling from Scotland to Devon in the latest BBC Two series currently on air. Theirs was a show free of the arrogance or ego of the professional TV chef. People kept watching because of the pair's enthusiasm for eating. The warmth and wit of Dave Myers, an essential ingredient in making the Hairy Bikers an enduring success. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Coming up on the UK Tonight, why a generous donation means that youngsters in Tyne and Wear will go to the ball. And Red Bull boss Christian Horner repeats his denial of inappropriate behaviour after an alleged leak of investigation material.
When I hit that water, I felt so victorious. I have had times in lessons where I've been struggling to walk, I've not been feeling well, and in the water, it all fades away and I'm just a different person. And learning to swim has been so freeing. I have sickle cell disease and I can swim.
For me, it was kind of, as a filmmaker, I wanted to look at things that were from my community that I could attempt to address. And I think when I came across that statistic, it was so shocking that I almost didn't believe it. And I thought, let me see if I can try and attempt to solve it in 12 minutes, which I feel like we did.
Yeah. Well, you take 3 black non-swimmers, all with differing barriers of entry, and you talk about their statistics, and they are shocking. Sport England say 87% of black adults don't swim, and 86% of black children don't swim.
Each one of them had their own individual story as to why they hadn't learnt to swim already. We had one guy who had really long dreadlocks, so his hair was always a barrier, and he couldn't find a hat to fit his head.
Yes, the practical issues as well, isn't it?
The practical issues around getting in the water. And with the others, health issues and, cultural issues as well around parents who don't bring, who didn't bring their children to the pool when they was younger or told them to stay away from water. So between the 3 of them, they all had individual issues that were all quite related to their upbringing and who they were as a person.
I think when it comes to swimming, I wanted to prove that, black people are not swimming because they're lazy. There's a lot of barriers of entry when it comes to learning to swim that they can now overcome. And I think the common myth is that the bone density of black people is significantly heavier than white people. And that is true. However, the difference between them is so minuscule that it wouldn't actually impact your ability to float.
Yeah.
So what a lot of black people say is, my bones are heavy, I'm going to drown, there's no point. Let's look at all of these things that over the years we've just used as excuses and see if we can tackle them one by one and overcome swimming and, really make it a space where black people feel welcomed and safe and, as people get older with, arthritis and that kind of thing, that black people can swim.
Hello, welcome back to the UK Tonight. Coming up, the generous donation from a local businessman in Tyne and Wear to help school pupils get to the prom. But first, David Garrido is here with the sport. And we're just a couple of days away from the opening of the new F1 season in Bahrain. Christian Horner remains in the headlines. There have been some leaks of alleged investigation material today. We'll come on to that in just a moment, but it's worth talking about the reaction of Christian Horner to being cleared by that internal investigation.
Well, that's it, isn't it? So that's what happened yesterday. He was cleared of allegations of inappropriate behaviour against him made by a female colleague. He has spoken for the first time publicly about that today, saying he was pleased the process was over, he couldn't comment further, and he just wants to focus on the upcoming Grand Prix, the season ahead, defending their titles, and that within Red Bull they had never been stronger within the team. But clearly also there have been other prominent figures in Formula One asked about this. Toto Wolff, the boss of Mercedes, said that he read the Red Bull statement from yesterday. He said that it was pretty basic. He said, our aspiration as a sport on such a critical topic, it needs more transparency. We cannot afford to leave things vague, opaque on critical topics like this. And Zach Brown, who's McLaren Racing CEO, said that he believed that the FIA, the governing body of world motorsport, including Formula One, should ask Red Bull for full details of the investigation. And an FIA spokesman said that Red Bull gave assurances in their statement that their investigation was thorough, and they say it's an internal employment process from here on in. So that's as far as all the sort of comment around it today. But I mean, as you mentioned, there were further developments.
Yeah, so that's all the official responses. And then earlier on this evening, it seemed that there were leaks of alleged investigation material. What can you tell us about that?
Well, and we have to be very careful with this. But what we can say is that material purporting to be the alleged evidence in this investigation into Christian Horner's behaviour towards a female colleague has been leaked to numerous media organisations and F1 team principals from an anonymous email account. And that's all that we can say. But obviously this was then put to Christian Horner again, and he himself has said this: I won't comment on anonymous speculation, but to reiterate, I've always denied the allegations. I respected the integrity of the independent investigation and fully cooperated with it with every step of the way. It was a thorough and fair investigation conducted by an independent specialist barrister, and it has concluded dismissing the complaint made. I remain fully focused on the start of the season. As we know, the Bahrain Grand Prix race weekend is already underway. Practice 1 and 2 today, 3 in qualifying tomorrow, and then the race on Saturday. But in terms of this story, it remains live at the moment. And remember also that the complainant has the right to an appeal. So that's the situation as far as Christian Horner is concerned. And plenty of other sports stories making the headlines this evening.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Now, this signifies a corner, OK? I don't want this and I don't want that. I need the hand up here, OK? That is contested.
It's school on a Sunday, but nobody's complaining, because the lesson is the laws of the game and the classroom is Villa Park. The FA wants to find 1,000 new black, Asian and mixed heritage referees from different communities around the country. It's part of the reflective and representative campaign.
We want to increase the pool of referees from these communities at a grassroots level, with the hope that in the future that these individuals can then go through the refereeing progression pathway.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And now we'd like to leave you with something weird or wonderful here on the UK Tonight, and this certainly falls into the wonderful category. A businessman in Tyne and Wear has donated 130 prom dresses and suits to a local community hub to help children whose parents may be struggling with the cost of living. Well, I'm very glad to say that Lee Nicholson, who runs that community hub in Washington, joins me now. Lee, this is such a lovely story. Gosh, I'm showing my age now, but I remember it being the end of year disco. Things have certainly ramped up a bit. It's now a full-on prom. And that can really put pressure on families, isn't it, to make sure that, you know, their kids can go to the ball?
It's massive pressure. The amount of money that dresses and suits cost nowadays is just astronomical. I know we have boys and it's not as bad, having boys than it is girls. I know some of the girls' dresses are just ridiculously priced. I'm pleased I don't have girls, to be fair.
Yeah, it's not just the dress with the girls, it's the shoes, the hair, the handbag. But listen, you knew this was a problem and kids would be missing out because they didn't have that suit or that dress to be able to go. And it's such a defining part of your childhood, isn't it? Ending that school year, that term with your friends. So what did you do?
So at the end of last prom season, we realised that kids just weren't getting through sheer cost. We noticed it was quite a large number. So we put a call. We already do like a uniform exchange from our building. So we thought we would do a prom as well. And so we've been asking for donations for dresses and suits since June, July time last year, and we've had quite a few, to be fair. I think we had about 20 or 30 dresses. And about 6 weeks ago, there was a guy got in touch with us from Sunderland who empties houses for a living, and he offered us he says, I've got about 130 dresses. Do you want them? And we sort of we were shocked. It was a massive donation. We didn't even know.
Can you give him a shout out? Because I think he deserves a bit of a shout out here on Sky News.
He's called John Helm. Yes. I can't remember the name of his business, to be fair. But John Helm, he came out. He actually delivered the dresses here for us. We didn't have to go and get them. It was absolutely fantastic. What he's done is going to help children in our area. Phenomenal amounts.
Well, it's incredible. So when do the girls and boys get to come in and choose their prom outfits?
So we've held one already, which was on last Saturday, where we've put all the dresses on rails, so it looks like a shop, and people can come in and decide on the dresses what they want. We've had a lot of other people from our community come forward and offer help with nails and hair and cleaning. Sorry, and we've had a lady come in today offering to do alterations, because obviously we know that the dresses aren't quite going to fit some girls, so we've got a lady on hand who might do a bit of alterations on the dresses as well. So it's going to be perfect for people.
Oh, Lee, this is such a great story, and it's a great way to close out the show. Just if people want to get in touch and make donations or offer you a bit of help, where can they get in touch with you? Just got 10 seconds.
Building Blocks Day Centre on Facebook.
OK, Lee, good luck with it all. Thank you so much. That's all from the UK Tonight. Yalda Hakeem is up next with The World.